Content warning, y'all. We have lots of fun making this podcast, but remember, we watch a lot of R-rated films, use language that reflects that, and joke about heavy topics to create levity around these themes. If that doesn't feel safe or could be triggering, please take care of yourself. We want you to have fun listening too. This also means we might not be suitable for children. Oh yeah, and we spoil the end of all the movies we pod about. Thanks for listening. Yeah.
So let that be a lesson to you kids.
Don't
And by
listen.
kids, I mean people my age. Don't listen to the Pixies.
Speaking of getting sunk, this movie really fucked with me last night, apparently.
Well, that's right.
I mean, I got stoned.
You got what now? Pwned?
Pretty much. And I had some sips
Somebody
of
hit
your
you with a noob tube?
had some sips of your delicious bourbon barrel wine. It was the bourbon
Light
barrel,
on the
right?
bourbon barrel, I'll say.
Light on the bourbon.
It didn't.
Light on the barrel, is what. That's how. I'm sorry. I'm trying to think of how I would describe it. Light on the barrel. Yeah, it was
on the barrel, heavy on the.
wine. It was a little bland. No, I don't know if bland. It was just like it felt not super complex to me. Flavor.
That's super. Yeah. My review was it was slightly more complex than complex is the word I didn't have, but exactly the word I wanted. I think I said nuanced.
Mm-hmm.
Slightly more complex than like the best
Boda box. Yeah.
Boda box I get.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's how I felt.
Which is usually good enough. Like,
Right.
Some of them have been. Some of those batches have been pretty good.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Nighthawk Black.
But I just got into not a good space.
Oh.
And like I was a little too remember I told you to feel my heartbeat?
Yes.
Because my heart was like racing and shit, and I couldn't calm down. The peppercorn helped a little bit, but I was just too something. And the ending, like I was really into
Well, this
it.
movie is visually a lot.
It's visually, I like it a lot visually, but I was actually fine until the ending with the circus shit happened, and I was
don't
like,
ruin it yet.
wait a little bit to ruin it. That's what like
Is that what broke you?
The end. I was just like, it just threw me so hard.
It's a radical shift. From
And I think it gave
happens
me
before
enough time to like kind of let the rest of it sink in that I was like, yeah. I was like, not, yeah. And it wasn't, yeah, I think it was just like, I realized that I had just essentially watched a movie about like religious trauma. I was like, oh. It was like it was a lot of what I was expecting, and not at all what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Like there was a lot of like crazy shots and like really like it was very experimental, but it wasn't. It was really like it was really interesting. I found that it was I'm sure this is not what he intended listening to any part of the commentary. This is not at all what the director, writer, he wrote it too, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. The writer and director intended, but it's so heavy on, it really felt like it was an examination of like the like demonization of women, especially in religion and around religion, because all of the things like, it's very interesting to, like, the way that Ashley Judd's character Callie was like.
She's only temptress,
Yeah.
harlot,
Yeah.
whatever, whore, all those things. A witch.
Yep.
Or, what else was I going to say? I had a third one, and it was not virgin, because she's not that ever.
No. Yeah.
She's not represented as, like, pure.
Right. But, like, when she taught, so, like, okay. So first, before we get really into it.
Victim. That's what I was going to say.
Oh, I was going to say victim, but I'm like, I'm sure that's not what he meant. So I'm not going to suggest victim.
Less archetypical than those other two roles, but.
Well, anyway, yeah. Follow us on Patreon.
ZNK Pod on all the platforms.
Yeah, ZNK Pod on Patreon.
If you're a patron,
ZNK Pod on
you could be listening
TikTok.
on a Friday.
We're doing Brendan Fraser, and apparently the Fraser stands are all about our Twitter, so y'all better get on that.
Ride the Tigress River Euphrates.
It's The Passion of Darkly Noon.
You got it.
And I only retain that because his name was Darkly Noon, so they say it a bunch. So I was able to retain that. That was the hardest part for me, was Darkly Noon. I was like, I'm never going to retain that. And then it was just like Darkly Noon over and over again. So Brendan
Fraser.
Brendan Fraser plays Darkly Noon, who is basically like the movie starts.
Before we get too much further, I want to say I had the before we went into the theater.
Yeah,
a lot of time has lapsed. I had the privilege to we watched the movie. Then I went home and got the DVD and watched it with commentary.
Correct.
In between when we spoke last in the lobby.
Yeah.
If you're a patron. So we watched it blind, except for, having seen the trailer.
Yeah.
And then I went back this morning and watched most of it with commentary. I skipped around, but
yeah,
I learned a lot from the commentary. And
yeah.
I'm very glad I did it. I've never done that since we started the pod.
Yeah. Fucking Christ. These gnats are going crazy.
So.
Yeah, so basically the movie starts out with, like, Brendan Fraser just, like, stumbling through the woods and a guy almost hitting him with his truck.
Yep.
And he takes him to the house of this girl named Callie, who's played by Ashley Judd. And, I think it's really interesting because she's you don't know at first because she's very, like, it's that thing of, like, she's either really innocent or she's not, because she's, like, really, like, it's that thing, though, of, like, it very much is presented, like...
Born Sexy Yesterday?
No. Like, she's doing things like it's really hot, so she's rubbing ice on her chest.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, she's doing that for him. No, it's fucking hot, and she's rubbing ice on her chest. I've fucking done that before. Like, it's just, like... but it's one of those things where it's like the perception is always like from Brendan Fraser, he's seeing like she's trying to tempt me.
Right.
And it's like a very interesting thing where she's like wearing very little clothes, and all this stuff. But to her, she's like her representation of things, like, because she finds out that he's super religious and she gets a little like, we should probably talk about that. She's like kind of immediately uncomfortable. You kind of get the feeling that she doesn't have a good, like, she's been burned by the church, essentially. She's been burned by Christianity. She's been burned by that because she says, like, Roxy took the story of her, like, being a really horrible person and, like, spread it around town, and so everybody thinks she's a harlot. Everybody thinks, but in reality, what happened was she was a child, and she was an innocent child, and an adult man, like, refused to, like, behave and tried to assault her. And it's interesting because she says he like died trying.
Yeah.
Or he died in the middle of it.
Right.
And then she says that Clay has a temper and he does. And so, and like Roxy, and why would like Roxy and Clay have nothing to do with each other kind of thing? So I'm like, oh, did Clay, and why would she love Clay so much? I mean, you know, like for that amount of time, you know, like she met him when she was like 15.
Oh, so maybe Clay
So I
killed his dad.
assumed, I thought that was going to be revealed. I assumed that Clay like walked in on what was happening and killed his father. And the mom is like, oh, she, you know, did all of this stuff and she killed him and, you know, and like isn't responding to Clay's role in it at all because all she sees is that her son isn't her son anymore or something like that.
Right. So if I can back up a little bit.
Yes, please.
Just to lay the foundation a little more. Yeah. Jude is the character's name in the truck.
Yes.
Played by Lauren.
Girl, I don't know.
Brain broke. Fuck.
Lauren Gus or something.
Moment. He was in Billy Bathgate, which I haven't seen. Lauren Dean. But that's...
Yeah, Lauren Gus, like I said.
Gus and Dean. And DeLuca. So...
Yes.
And he brings the as yet unnamed Darkly to Callie's house.
Yeah.
Which is in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
Seemingly he was already, that's where he was headed anyway, because he sort of makes deliveries back and forth for them.
Uh-huh.
This is a thing I should have put together, but did not.
Uh-huh.
And why there's all these references to coffins. That's what Clay makes.
Yeah.
I did not.
Oh, okay. Because when he's first putting something in the truck, it's a child-sized coffin.
Right. And a thing I appreciated from the
I only figured that out though because I was like, what the fuck is that supposed to be?
Yeah.
And then he said something like about like Clay making coffins, and I was like, oh fuck, that was a little tiny coffin. I was like, that's so fucking dark.
Yeah.
To have just like the quick, like it's not mentioned, it's not talked about. It's literally just a little baby coffin.
Yeah. So it gets established when Jude brings Darkly to Callie that Clay also lives there, but he's
Not
gone.
Around. Yeah.
We don't know when he's coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Jude is like, well, maybe this is it. Maybe he's never coming back.
Yeah.
This time, and I think we get, if it's not explicitly stated by this point, we do get the impression that they're sort of on the outskirts on purpose because they've sort of been ostracized or whatever.
Yeah. Because he says like you could just go into town and get your own supplies.
Now you should come to town to get them, you know.
Give everyone the satisfaction of staring at me, whispering and judging. I can live without that. Besides, I have you to fetch things for me.
And then, so Jude leaves, and then, you know, next day, what?
Sorry, no, I'm just remembering how Callie goes through his stuff and finds his Bible. And then the next day when he wakes up, she's like, your clothes were ruined, so I burned them. And I'm like, what the fuck? It's so fucking dramatic.
I know. Also, I thought it was an odd choice that when she's going through his clothes, you get a shot, like she picks up his pants and goes through them, and then you see a shot of them falling on the ground, like a separate shot from. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, what I assume is she's going through them, and when she doesn't find anything, she just throws them on the ground.
Oh, yeah, it's clear what's happening to me.
Okay.
I just thought it was funny that we got two separate perspectives.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess I just don't get the humor in it. I just think
I meant peculiar.
Oh, okay.
Anyway.
It made sense in my head. I think.
Well, to me, I gave a weight that I'm like, is something going to happen? Are we going to get it?
Right, yeah.
Anyway.
I think it was hilarious that that giant ass Bible is just in his pants pocket or something? Like,
I think it was supposed to be his jacket pocket, but yeah,
no,
it is
she
huge.
picks up his jacket, or maybe she does. Yeah, but yeah, how does it fit?
It's well, and more importantly, I think it's hardbound is the thing. Like it's a
Yeah, and like I mean, sure, I'm sure ministers' clothing is like they probably have it special made to
For
hold
Bible
a
pockets.
big ass Bible.
Anyway, so the next day he wakes up
Mm-hmm.
and we get his some backstory, which is that he was part of a small community who lived by God's words.
I'm so sorry, but that whole explanation of his, I was like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Which
Because
part?
he's like, at first he's like, I guess I'm sure it was a cult, but he was like, the way he describes it is both like, because he's saying, sorry, it's just like, it was so hard for me to understand. Because first of all, he was talking in whispers. It was like,
and with a stammer. Yeah.
So he's talking, but he says like, I'm sure you'll put in the clip or a clip of what he says, and listening back will be like, oh, this makes sense. But like, from what I could hear,
Yeah.
it was like, oh, we were in a community and we all lived by God's word. But then my parents got ostracized because nobody wanted to live by God's word. And then the helicopters came.
Townspeople, they don't like us.
Because you were different.
The police came. They told us we can't stay there anymore. We have to leave. We can't live the way we want to. The townspeople came too. And then they surrounded us. They were screaming at us all the time, calling us names. Doing everything they can to make us surrender. We won't change to please them. Cut off our food, power, water. There's helicopters circling overhead all day and night, playing music really, really loud. But it's them who are wrong. They're the heretics. God's on our side.
What? Like...
Yeah, it's a little convoluted. And I think that's on purpose.
Okay, yeah, exactly. I figured it was. But I was just like...
Especially after living... after living through the commentary. There's a lot of things that you're like, is that a choice? This seems contradictory. Yes, it's all a choice. So I appreciate that. I feel confident now in saying...
yeah.
There's... I do often enjoy the ambiguity of not knowing what is intended.
Correct. Yes.
So that's one of the reasons I often, or usually don't listen to commentary.
Right. I like that he's... I just like that the writer was like, I don't know what this ending means. Maybe I never will. And I'm like, you fucking wrote it, bro. Anyway, go ahead.
Kind of makes me mad, but...
I know.
He, listening to the commentary, endeared me to him, so...
A little bit. I was a little annoyed by how he was like, I don't know.
So the understanding I made from what Darkly says in that scene is that they were in a town, and their little community was a subset in that town, right? And they got sort of pushed further and further out of the main population.
Okay.
And then at some point the cops got involved, but that the violence, quote, as far as shots fired or the attack on their compound or what have you, started from the townsfolk.
Right.
But escalated rapidly. I just imagine it as a Waco type situation.
Right, that's what I was...
Which I think is meant to be being evoked.
Right. But and that would make sense with how she was
But with townsfolk involved.
Yeah.
Mucking it up. So, nobody knows who shot first, but it quickly exploded because cops.
Gotcha.
That's how I read it.
Yeah, and that makes sense with how Callie is like, I want to talk to you about your parents and their religion. It makes sense if that's what was going on, why she would be like, hey, Don't do that here.
Oh yeah, right. We don't. And later when she says, "Don't spoil it,"
Yeah.
what the fuck? I would like to interject some things I learned from the commentary.
Bless.
First, he had storyboarded out the attack on the compound. Like that was going to be a
wow.
pre-credits sequence.
Oh, wow.
It didn't happen because I guess the
Budget?
budget kept getting
Yeah.
slashed.
Hearing how the end was shot,
Exactly.
I'm surprised they shot what they did.
Yeah, he said originally we're going to have 9 weeks to shoot. It got cut repeatedly down to 6 weeks.
Okay.
And he said then we lost half a week to weather.
Oh, fuck.
So
Wow.
5.5 weeks, 4.5 weeks or something. They shot
man.
everything.
Oh, my God.
That's on location, I believe.
It was all shot in Germany.
It was all shot in Germany. However, not all of it was shot in the forest.
Right. Some of it was
A lot of it
soundstage.
was shot
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
like apparently all the interiors of the house were on set.
Yeah.
On a studio. The cave was built. That was
Okay.
a built set.
I was wondering though because it seemed to, well, because so Keith was like, where, like the outdoor shots.
Yeah.
And like he was like, where the hell could this have been? And I was pretty sure. I thought it looked similar to The Last of the Mohicans, which I'm pretty sure was shot in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, it's probably North Carolina. And I looked it up, and it was like literally the entire film was shot
Saxony.
in Germany. I was like, what?
Yeah. Okay. And it was one of my first comments because the first shots are like these
Yeah.
gorgeous panoramic,
Mm-hmm.
long
I'm going to look up Last of the Mohicans, and it's probably going to be like Germany.
Saxony, Bavaria. And I think like it's one of my favorite things is to try to place things geographically in like
Yeah.
how if you have a Windows computer, when Windows first comes up,
Computer.
you'll get an image that Windows shows you, and
Mm-hmm.
mine are such that they're often landscapes, and I like trying to guess where they are.
Oh, well, yeah. I really hate the landscapes they show 90% of the time. That's why I was like, ooh.
But what was baffling to me was how wooded it was, but also how you had these giant like mesas and rock formations. That's what was tripping me out.
Mm-hmm.
And assuming it was in the States because of
Right.
the
Right,
actors.
it being and it being like an independent film.
Yeah. So, and then from the commentary, he says he was like one of the things he wanted from those opening shots was for it to feel a little bit alien.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
and the cinematographer said, "Well, okay, what do you want it to look like?" And he says, "Like I want it to look like Mars." So, mission
Damn.
accomplished. In that,
Yeah.
I was boggled and
No, I was right. All the Last Mohicans was shot in North
Saxony.
Carolina. In Saxon, North Carolina.
So they did not shoot the compound attack scenes, and he said the movie's better for it.
Yeah,
like
totally,
the ambiguity
totally.
of it is good. And one of the things I appreciate about the movie, is the conflicting narratives. You don't really know
Mhm.
what has happened, right?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
You don't. All you have is everyone's telling of it.
Yeah.
So
Which,
we only know what Darkly says
yeah.
about his past. We only know what Roxy says about
Mhm.
her past. We only know
What Callie says. Yeah.
And we get a tiny bit of, sort of impartial observer from Jude,
Right.
but not a whole lot,
Yeah.
and he mostly is just, I feel like, there to pad out and support Callie's description of things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What else was I going to say about that scene? So, Philip Ridley's first film is The Reflecting Skin, which I haven't seen, but now I really want to watch. And it was shot in Alberta.
Gotcha.
And apparently, like, a lot of the drivers or local folks who he encountered while shooting the film would tell him about how there had been a cult in the area a few years previous.
Oh, when he was filming the reflective skin?
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. I was like,
And-
that's such a coincidence. Oh.
Sure is. Wait till you hear what I say next. From which a young man had run away and made it to Calgary, which is a big city, and apparently had kind of lost it once being overwhelmed by the city. So that was the spark for this
Wow.
story.
Wow. Interesting. I wanted to mention something. Something that I found interesting in what you were saying with like the telling of like we don't see what happened, we are told what happened, and we're told different perspectives from different people, which is very accurate to reality, which is interesting because it's a surrealist film, but it's super. But something that I thought was like really important, and it's what made, to me, I mean, obviously also like being in a similar sort of like the way that Callie lives, and you know, it's like I related a lot to that. You'll be surprised.
Because we live in the middle of the woods.
No, just because
So to
I'm a
speak.
straight white woman.
Oh, yeah, fair. Blonde.
Anyway, so
Well, you never wore bras.
it's true.
Neither do I, for that matter.
No, it's because you make coffins. You're constantly creating death
So to speak.
canisters.
Death canisters. Welcome to the stage. Death canisters. Blast beats. Also, from the commentary, I learned that we'll get to it later where this comes from, but havoc with the ripples was something somebody said, and then they all agree that sounded like a 70s punk band,
Nice, yeah.
and they created a whole
Oh wow.
mythology around this band.
So when she's sitting and she's trying to have like a conversation with Brendan Fraser's this is something that I really hated about it. His name is Darkly Noon. First name Darkly, the last name Noon. And she was like, I refuse to call you Darkly, so I'm just gonna call you Lee. And I hated that because the amount of times people are like, I refuse to call you Z. I'm going to call you something else. And I'm like, nope, that's not how names work. It's not how names work.
That's
you don't get
a
to
very
say
white person thing to
Yes,
do
correct.
to someone with
a name that they...
yes, especially a name that is not Western European.
Yeah.
In origin.
You know, I'm just uncomfortable with your name, so I'm going to call you something else. Okay? Like, no, that's not how names work. You don't get to do that. Like, if you have trouble saying someone's name...
Oh, your name's Ming Na. I'm going to call you Ching Chong.
God, I can't believe that. I was telling Keith about this story I read where Ming Na was talking
Which,
about...
honestly, I would say for English speakers, professionals like myself,
Somebody's
Ching
showing off.
Chong is harder to say than Ming Na.
That's fair. But also, like, the fact that, like, I was saying how I think it's really it's so fucking lazy and, like, so nonsensical, the things that people pick on. And I was like, I remember reading that and being just like, this is like the thing. I don't know how to talk about it where it doesn't sound like I'm like, I just can't believe people are racist. That's not what I mean. And I'm not
Right.
like, I just wish racists were more imaginative. That's also not what I'm saying.
No, that's cool.
What I'm saying is that they don't hear how stupid they sound is what I mean.
Yeah.
They're saying this and they're like, yeah, this makes sense. I'm going to make fun.
Burn.
Yeah, it's like, what do you think you're accomplishing here? What do you think
Right.
you're accomplishing here? It's stupid. Anyway, so she's talking to him. I think it's when she's trying to talk to him about like his like dogmatic perspective on Christianity. And then you hear like then, you don't know who it is at the time, but gunshots.
Oh, the gunshots, yeah.
Yeah, and like it's shooting at the house.
Right.
So Callie grabs the fucking like shotgun or whatever and goes outside and starts like shooting into the woods, and she's like yelling. She's like, "Why don't you show your face? Like, what are you?" I don't know. She's just like being confrontational, but the gunshots keep happening, and Darkly's like freaked out. He's like, "What the fuck?" And she's like, they're not trying to hit me. They're trying to, and he's like, he's like, why are they shooting? And she says, they just want me to know they're here and they're like watching or whatever.
Yeah.
And then later he says like, when he meets Roxy,
right.
who you find out is Clay's mother.
Right.
Clay being Callie's partner. He says, "Oh, it was you who was shooting at Callie." He was like, "Why were you doing that?" And she says, "I just want her to know that I'm here and I'm watching and waiting or whatever." Which is exactly what Callie says. Like, she says it the same way.
Right, it's not meant to hurt me. It's just meant to let me know that you're out there.
What are you going to do a thing like that for?
To remind her that I am still here, watching and waiting.
So that, to me, made Callie a more reliable narrator than Roxy, because Callie wasn't making it up. She wasn't being hyperbolic. She wasn't saying things that didn't happen. She's saying the reason is this, because that's the reason that she was given. So that's what she's saying. So it made, I don't know if that was intentional, but for me, that's when I was like, oh, Callie's the one that's being honest. Like, Callie's the only one in this that's like actually being truthful.
Right.
And even when she's talking to Jude and Clay, when like Darkly and Clay get in a fight and Clay goes like Clay kicks him out, and like, or they kick him out, they're like, yeah, you can't be here anymore, and Darkly goes away. Jude's like, where did he go? And she's like, I don't know. And then Clay leaves, and she's like, I didn't want to say anything in front of Clay because I knew that he would try to find, like, he would go after Lee and he would try to hurt him, or he might do something to him. She's not saying, don't tell Clay I said this. No, she's saying, I don't want things to escalate.
Right.
Like, she's being, and she's not pretending. Like, she's not pretending. She's saying, I didn't say this in front of Clay because I do not want the situation to get worse. Here's where he is.
Right.
And then she's like, okay, go get him. Like, she's the one. She's seemingly, like, I think Clay and Jude, like, Callie, Clay, and Jude seem to be the most level-headed. I think Clay is, like, questionable a little bit because...
Well, the film definitely makes him questionable.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're basically told he's got a temper, but, like, I don't feel like he's as volatile as he's, like, described. But, like...
Also, he's mute?
Yes. So, which I think is interesting because it seemingly is like, that's Roxy's way of like infantilizing him, which feels accurate because she's like, my precious silent boy, but she like infantilizes him, which lines up with autism. But, like being infantilized, like he's an adult. He's just, and he's not able, and it was interesting because he says, how come you can't talk? And Clay points to his like neck, implying that like he just can't, like it doesn't work or whatever. Which I thought was interesting because it's not like just never felt like it or anything. It's like,
it's not the quiet.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. It's one of those things where it's like, it's just like basically like, okay, I can't because I can't. And I kind of appreciated that,
And it's never really brought up again.
Right, yeah. I mean, what was I saying about, like Roxy infantilizes Clay, and like there's a lot of like things that are really, it's really interesting, like the way that the characters, and I really, really liked how Roxy was like, she's a witch. And he's like, how do you know? And she's like, I knew the second I saw her that she wasn't as innocent as she was acting. And I'm like, that's exactly what it's like. That's exactly what it's like. That's exactly what it's like to be like a woman in the South that isn't really Like, I mean, not specifically right, but like especially, I mean, like in the Bible Belt, like with a lot of
yeah.
religion around you. Like
Yeah.
Southern religion is a specific thing that's like really, I mean, like there's other kinds of,
Sure.
there's religious dogma everywhere. There's, it's all over the U.S. It's not something that's
Yeah,
like,
but
like the Bible Belt is where like most of the, I mean, you have like
it's called the
rollover.
Bible Belt for a reason, right?
Right. It's called the Bible Belt for a reason, but you have a lot of rollover from you have a lot of rollover from the Confederacy sort of.
Right.
There's a lot of like Old Testament values in the Bible Belt that aren't other places, and it was like I felt like I felt like there was a subtlety and a depth in the way that they portrayed like the demonization of Callie that was like really, really, it really struck me. It really struck me the way that she is so heavily, and everything and the part where she says, "Is this my fault? Did I do this?" I was like, fuck, because that is exactly what happens. Like, men come to you, men like chase you, men fantasize about you, they turn you into something, and then it's your fault that they turned into this monster.
So much of that happens though from the little we get from Roxy, and but it's done so deftly that it's like, I mean, nothing about this movie feels particularly like organic. You know what I mean? Like
right, yeah.
And after listening to the commentary, I know that's basically by choice, but like, as sort of like artificial as him running into Roxy is, her telling of things makes perfect sense and totally flushes out a lot of the what you're talking about around Callie's stuff, and it makes me think that's a lot. It feels like a Stephen King character a lot. I mean, like I mean,
it feels like a really like it feels like reading a Stephen King story. Where you're like, what the fuck?
Anyway,
why is there so much religion in this?
Anyway, all I'm trying to say is that as as artificial as it is, as much an artifice, it still feels, it really works.
Yeah.
I mean, you get so much from Roxy in the little bit we see of her. We really get like 2-3 scenes before she kills herself. Spoiler.
Yeah. But
she does so much to the story.
Yes.
And of course, Grace Zabriskie, who plays her, is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's making me appreciate Brendan Fraser.
Yeah,
and
of course.
That's one of the points of doing this.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's, I know this is kind of around his peak, but like getting the douche Ian McKellen and then Grace Zabriskie and like how you, and he holds his own, like I don't think he's given all that much necessarily, but
right.
And Zabriskie is I'm most familiar to people I think from Twin Peaks.
Right. Yeah.
And so you may think she doesn't have a lot of range because she kind of just plays
kooky.
Cracked, and she's got those eyes, and the frizzy hair. But she's really got a subtle. I don't know. Anyway, kudos to Fraser for.
Yeah, seriously, but like something that I really appreciated about his performance, and I think the way that.
Oh, also, sorry, I just remembered that she was cast last.
Oh,
shooting had already begun.
Oh, what?
Before they cast Roxy.
That's nuts. That's actually surprising to me.
Yeah, it is because she's such a good fit.
Yeah. So something that I really think that Brendan Fraser is able to capture in this is it's super interesting because, okay, so he's like, super religious, or the Darkly is super religious, grew up like that, grew up with dogma, grew up, believing this. And so Callie's kind of rocking his world a little bit. Like she's,
so to speak.
well, yeah, but she's like being really nice to him. And it's something that's like, this is also a thing that men get really confused about.
Mhm.
If a girl isn't being super, like if she's not like old enough to be your mom.
Right.
Then if she's being nice to you, then you're like, oh, we're going to get married.
Mhm.
Like, it's this thing where like men aren't taught how to like have women be nice to them without it being sexualized. But she's also, I think, what I take it as, maybe I'm wrong, but like she's also like, oh, let's go swimming. And he's like, don't take your clothes off. And she's like, why not? What does that have to do with anything? And I see that as her being like, but you swim naked. Like, that's how you're supposed to swim. And so it's like their worldviews not matching. And he's like, no, like, that's not something that that needs to happen. And she's like, okay, fine, then I'll leave my slip on.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, that's fine, right? But like, he's still seeing it as her, like, to her, she's like, okay, well, I'll concede to make you more comfortable. But he's still seeing it as her being like a temptress.
Right.
I fucked that word up. I don't know exactly.
Temptress. Teamster.
Tupperware.
A real Rubbermaid.
So he starts to like obviously develop feelings for her, and I think he jacks it. Yeah, he jacks it in the
Bouncing up and down.
It really reminded me of, I had just talked about that scene in I Shot Andy Warhol, where like it's supposed to be Lily Taylor getting like fucked really uncomfortably, but it's very clear that Lily Taylor's just bashing her own head against a wall, like they're trying to
Yeah.
And like it reminded me of that because he's like jerking off, but like his face is going up and down, and I'm like, that.
Yeah, we see his face, or like his eyes through the slats in the
'cause
barn
he's,
or whatever.
We're getting the perception of him watching.
And he's just bouncing up
Yeah,
and down,
I'm
and that's
like,
meant to
what the-
communicate the.
Like, are you?
I don't know
jumping
why.
while you jerk off? Like,
We
what's
didn't
going
need
on?
that. It's clear you see his hands go down his
I know,
pants,
yeah.
and he's like groaning or whatever.
Yeah. I do love though when he's like, "Ah!" and then it just immediately cuts. That was really funny to me. So then Clay comes back, and his perception of her then shifts.
Right.
Because now she's a whore. Now and then he meets Roxy, and all his feelings of jealousy, he won't acknowledge that he's jealous. It's Callie's fault.
Right.
And so Roxy's like, "Oh, she does that. She tempts you. And he's like, "Yes, this
makes sense.
This fits into all the negative things that I'm feeling. It's not my fault.
Well,
it's her fault.
Yeah.
It's not I don't need to deal with these feelings. I need to shame her because I feel these feelings." And it really, I felt like it was such a great performance, like, because he has so little dialogue.
Yeah.
And so much is shown of just like his, like, just the way he looks at her and the way he behaves around her, not necessarily like even in the way he talks, but just how he's, and when he wraps himself in barbed wire and then he's like wearing like all these like hot, no one knows, and everyone knows something's wrong with him. And
Another
he's
thing I
just
didn't
like,
get
he's just
until-
like, right.
Things I didn't understand either until the end of the film or watching the commentary. One, coffins. Two, that he was wearing the barbed wire the whole time. I thought he was getting sick from
No, because I was like,
having
that's why
cut
they thought he was
himself.
sick.
And then I don't think you heard me say this because just this morning, but like when you see the parents,
Yeah.
his hallucinating of his parents.
Uh-huh.
I didn't put together until today that they're full of bullet holes.
You didn't get...
I thought that was like decomposition, is what that was supposed to be.
I see. Wow.
I'm perceptive.
Oh. Well, you weren't wearing your glasses though.
Not the whole time, no.
Yeah, so that's understandable.
Anyway, so it all, I mean, it goes
Yeah.
where you think it's going to go. It escalates until
Right. Yeah. He
Darkly
was-
cracks and paints himself red. You know, you see that coming a mile away. He's going to
Yeah.
paint himself. No, I'm just kidding. And he takes, I think pointed out in the commentary that I didn't think about is the tool, that giant ass planer or whatever, arrives at the same time as Darkly.
Oh.
Jude brings both of them to the compound, to
Interesting.
the homestead is how he keeps referring to it in the commentary.
Oh, I didn't think
Yeah,
about that.
so
I mean, it's basically like like a giant version of like the wood scraper. Like when you're like shaping wood, there's like a little, I've seen like a little one of that. It's literally like,
it's the size of a cricket bat,
yeah,
maybe longer.
yeah. It's super interesting. I was super fascinating by it. And
I
I
wonder
loved
if
it
that's
as
a real
weapon.
tool.
I know. I loved it as a weapon though.
Oh, yeah, it's a great weapon.
But
Some people call it a swing blade. Swing blade. See, that's another one I do, like Morgenstern.
anyway. So I just want to say this because I know I'm going to forget. I keep being like, oh, I want to say this. At the end, so I was like looking when I was like when I was looking for like I was like purposely trying not to look at the trivia. But I was like looking for like locations and I looked and I saw the dialogue and like the first one that like the preview of like dialogue or like quotes or whatever from the
like
movie.
how IMDb has quotes.
Yes.
I hate that section, by the way.
And yes,
the
I
point?
hate it. It's so stupid because the quotes it picks are nonsensical.
Yeah.
But the first one I saw was her being like, I love you, Darkly. So I knew that was going to happen, but I didn't know when. And so I was like, and I was like not looking forward to hearing it. And then when it happened, I was like, whoa, this is actually really because he stops. Like he's about to kill her and she's like, I love you, and he stops.
Yeah.
And then he doesn't kill her. And I was like, oh man, there's so many ways to interpret this. And I was like, I really like, and at first I was like, do I like it? And then I was like, I do think I like it because I think it's super complex because
of his response.
Well, because of his response, but also because I'm like, in that moment of fear, there are so many things that you would say and feel.
Sure.
And it seemed so real to me that she said that. You know, in that moment, like of like forgiveness and, you know, because a lot of times, you know, I think with Christianity and stuff like that, like the main theme of things is like love and forgiveness and like, I mean, it's not the actions don't reflect the words, but the words are all about love and forgiveness and all that shit. But
Jesus was all about that shit.
He was all about that shit. Jesus was like, this is the shit I'm all about. And then he was like, love, forgiveness, and all that shit.
He said, turn them cheeks. Let me see them cheeks turning. Now the other.
He said, twerking for Jesus, to working for the Lord.
The mystery of what is she going to do with all that junk? All that junk in that trunk.
One time while working, there were a bunch of, while I was working at the art theater, there were one of the Catholic churches around here rented out the entire theater to play a religious movie. And so there were nuns there.
Wow.
And two hilarious things happened. One, I drew for Kendall, I drew a nun, like with a big ass and like, you know, like movement, like little squiggles, like they were, and I wrote twerking for Jesus.
Got one.
Yeah. And so we were like twerking for Jesus, twerking for the Lord, and like we were singing that to each other. We made a song out of it.
All right.
Because I drew that, but while they were like there, I drew this and like put it on the monitor so that you could see. But they couldn't see it because we were behind a counter. Anyway, I'm really good at that
Brilliant.
kind of shit. I also drew one of my managers as a penis when I was a bank teller, and I hung it up at my desk. And you. I'm really good at being respectful. Anyway.
Okay, we're going to take a break real quick. Be right back.
Okay, so I'm sure that you have heard me tell the story before, but I don't care because I'm telling it anyway. The art theater used to, in the 70s, show porn.
Yes.
Good Lord,
People love
people
to
love
tell you
talking about that. Although one dude did come in and say that in the 70s, when it was a porno theater, he basically got hired to mop the floors after. And he was like, so that's what I did, and I was like, I don't want to know that story.
Your name should be on a plaque.
Right. So anyway, there was a picture on the wall of when it was of when it was a porno theater.
Oh.
So yeah.
I thought you were going to talk about the amazing mural of all the
No.
movie stars.
That does not deserve to be mentioned. So these nuns are in the movie theater, and one of them finds the picture on the wall of when it used to be a porno theater. She loses her shit.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my God.
We're in a house of sin.
No. Oh no, it's amazingly better than this. She was like, and we were like, yeah, in the 70s, this place used to show porn. And she was like, oh my God. And so I was like, oh, this is hilarious. And she was like, this used to be a porno theater. And we were like, yeah. And it was me and RW working. Or like RW was there. And I had never been around nuns before. This was my first experience being around nuns. And so I was losing my shit, and he was just like enjoying me being like, I don't know how to take this in.
He was used to being around nuns?
I don't know. He just
okay.
didn't. He was just like whatever about it.
Right.
And I was like, I mean, he's been around he used to be in the military, so like he has lots of experience with lots of things.
Lots of nuns going to the service.
I mean, he's been other places and done things, and so he, who knows what he has experience with. Anyway, so then the nun, who very clearly doesn't understand pornography, is like, and I expected her to be like, oh, this is horrible. I can't believe we chose this theater. She's like, what? She was like, how amazing is this? She was like, it used to be a theater that showed porn, and now it's showing a film of God. She was like, it's
been saved.
But she then was like, this is what happens. Like, God, takes over, and there's no more porn. She's like, theaters don't show porn anymore. We're winning. And RW and I were like, we looked at each other and we were like,
it's true.
Don't go on the internet. We're like, oh. She was under the impression that because porno theaters didn't exist, people didn't have as much access to porn any longer. And she was like, and now we're showing a Christian film in what used to be a porno theater. She was like, God is winning. And we were like, oh, no. Oh, no.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And our dad was like, don't tell her about the internet. And I was like, I was like losing my shit. And she knew I was losing my shit. And she thought it was really funny. So she kept talking to me because she knew I was like overwhelmed and had not been around. And she was like, oh. And RW was like, she's purposely talking to you because she knows that you're losing your shit. And I was like, somebody make it stop. Anyway, I found it. I don't know. I don't know if I still have the physical copy, but I found a photo of Twerking for Jesus.
Oh, nice.
I'll send that. Maybe I'll post it to Patreon. Maybe that'll be a Patreon exclusive.
Wow, I like that.
Yeah. Go on our Patreon so you can see my cartoon of a nun twerking for Jesus. So anyway, what were you saying about Darkly Past Noon? Yeah, that's fair. There's so much in this movie.
Yeah.
I just wanted to emphasize when I was talking about how he his perception of her, how I said this, but I want to really emphasize it because this is a Brendan Fraser fest.
Yeah.
Brendan Fraser I feel like Brendan Fraser's underrated in how, I really do feel like so often he's shown as I feel like it's similar to a Keanu Reeves thing.
Yeah.
where he's like, oh, he's the pretty face, like, oh, make him, the dumb one in the corner, and like he can do so much more. Yeah. And like I was saying, like when we were watching, when we watched Johnny Mnemonic, and like I was like, Keanu Reeves is one of the most fantastical physical actors. He can because I remember watching the scene where he's like in the bathroom and he's like really overwhelmed. I was like, oh my God, I feel sick like watching this, because he's he's like getting, and I was like, oh God. And I'm like, oh, that's his performance. Like this isn't editing. Like he's performing, like he's in pain and gonna throw up. And I feel like I feel sick watching this. I'm like, oh, he's actually fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like that. I feel like with Brendan Fraser, like there's it sucks. I talked about this in Gods and Monsters. It sucks to be like completely have your body completely destroyed by the industry that was forcing you to have that body in the first place. But also like to completely overlook so much of your talent. Like I think this one of the reasons why I was excited to watch this is because like it was clear it was an indie film.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times with indie films, people do have more permission to perform, to like give a performance. And I felt like this was something that we were getting. Like we actually got him performing and not performing as like a muscular dude coming in and beating guys up, the funny guy's tripping, that kind of thing. Like he's like showing this, and the way he goes from being like super innocent and nervous to just being completely like, yeah, I'm just gonna come kill you.
Yeah.
It's so believable. It's so believable. It doesn't ever feel like it's jumped. It doesn't feel like
a perfectly natural evolution.
And some of that, yes, is editing and directing and like the pacing and stuff like that. But none of that could have happened without him performing at that. And he makes it so fucking subtle the whole fucking time. And there's so much that he's just like, he's sorry, there's a gnat in my face. There's so much that he's just like presenting, and like there's close-ups of just his eyes, and like there's so many things where, and he's just like able to carry this. Like, and I think if it was anyone else doing this, I don't think it would have been. I think it would have felt really out of place.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I do feel the same way about Ashley Judd, though. I feel like Ashley Judd did really good. I really liked her. I
have mixed feelings about her being cast in this. I don't dislike her.
You seem like
I think she's very competent as an actor, but it's confusing casting to me. I mean, a little bit it's the role.
Well, this lines. Okay, sorry. I was just gonna say this lines up with how she was perceived at this time. I think in the 90s.
Yeah. Well, I don't feel like I have that baggage.
Interesting.
About. Like, because I was not even aware of her, I don't think, until...
It's bonkers to me. Like, that's wild.
I wanted to say about Brendan Fraser, though, like, in that... I linked to it in the Gods and Monsters episode, interview from 2018.
Yeah, I was thinking the one you sent me.
Which is where he is the first time he publicly talks about being assaulted.
Yeah.
But... the writer, Zach somebody, talks about how a lot of the roles he got cast in is because he's so good at... He has this look about him where he's, like, new to the world. And that's so many of the roles he does, like this one and Encino Man and just Airheads. He's kind of like, he's always kind of a... innocent.
Born Sexy Yesterday a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Like he's hot, but he's also like what?
He's hot. No, like he's gay, Anyway.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it. He's like an innocent.
Yeah.
But
yeah, for sure.
But not. He's usually given a little more than that. Not just he's not playing someone with a disability.
Right. Bedazzled. We have to watch Bedazzled.
Okay.
That's a movie that's like. I think it's not. I remember feeling like it wasn't as funny to me, or it didn't have like.
Remind me what it is.
It is. He like makes a deal with the devil or something like that. I don't know. It's not that. It's a comedy movie.
Yeah.
He plays like a different he basically is like he makes a wish and then his life changes, and it's all the ways. It's basically like monkey's paw kind of thing. Like he makes a wish and then, it goes wrong, and he's like, oh no, I'm wishing for this instead, or no, I want this instead.
But aren't there like, okay, anyway.
And so the scenario, he'll be like, I want to be famous, and so he's like a famous basketball player, but like he has like it's a great joke, but I think it's like the monkey's paw is that he has a really small penis. Oh well. But he's playing
racist.
a giant basketball player, sorry. And he's like really tall compared to everyone else, and it's like very clear that it's like, he's like, I don't know, on stilts or something. I don't know. He's just like, and then he's playing like, it's seeing him perform all of these characters.
Oh, nice.
Like there's one where he's like, I think like a Spanish drug dealer, but he only speaks Spanish, but he doesn't know Spanish, and he's like, "What is this? I'm speaking Spanish. How does this happen?" And he's like, "Whoa, this seems so natural. I'm doing it so well." Anyway, it's like, it's just whatever. It's me describing it is not hilarious at all, and the movie itself isn't that funny. But Brendan Fraser performing as all of these different characters,
right,
is what makes it compelling. Like I don't think the movie is like a comedy. Like it's not that fun. I don't remember it being that funny.
Mm-hmm.
But watching him perform as all of these things, like I've been really wanting to rewatch it. But yeah. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to say though is there's a shot. I don't remember when it is, but it's him and Judd facing each other, but we see him on the side, and he looks so huge and hulking compared to her.
Yes.
And man, after watching Gods and Monsters, I'm like, I cannot not see him as the monster.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
anytime he's clomping around and trying to look big, that's all I see.
Yeah. Oh man, but the way he was standing in that, I was like, oh my god, this is so perfectly, because that was like a good shot where he was he looked so menacing and scary. And he looked like dangerous.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting. What I liked about that is because she's like, she comes after him, and then it's very clear that she sees that his perception of her has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he turns around and he like steps for her, she steps back and she's like, what's this? She's like, whoa. But you're seeing that in how, like, you see how much he towers over her and how much bigger he is than you. You become like, you're like, oh shit. It does such a great job of making you afraid
because otherwise
for
you
her.
You haven't gotten that sense of their physical differences from how it's shot previously. Yeah. So yeah.
And
good point.
does such a good job of you suddenly being like, she might be in danger. Like, oh shit.
For the first time, you feel like...
Right. You really feel like it's changed.
Yeah, it's shifted.
And, yeah. Would you recommend?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like...
Good luck getting a hold of it.
Yeah.
Ooh.
After I listened to the commentary, and, like, even the director's, like, he'll do interviews, and he's like, people were asking him about his lost film, meaning this one. And I'm guessing it didn't actually get a theatrical release.
Yeah, I don't.
From what he said,
I'm
he
not
said
sure.
it did well on the festival circuit, but that's.
Well, he said no one else really knew how to take it, so I don't really knew how to.
Which I don't
necessarily. So
I
don't know what that means.
I
assumed people weren't interested in seeing it because reviewers didn't know how to talk about it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I don't know if that means that they didn't see it in the theater, or if they weren't like. Seeing it out in the
right.
Yeah.
Can I go through my notes?
Please. Please. I would recommend it as well. I think it's something that I think.
Yeah, let me know if you I'll burn you a copy.
Yeah, literally.
I got the DVD, and I'm so glad I did, especially before the commentary. And I'm so glad I listened to that.
It is really, really.
And it's a beautiful transfer.
Yes, it's beautiful, but it's also like. It's actually like I wasn't expecting this. It's actually really pretty. Like it's wildly oversaturated throughout the entire film, which was very surprising to me.
I was a little shocked that it was film.
Yeah. Right. I was sitting there.
Given how
I
saturated
knew
it was.
that it was because it was obviously from 1995. They weren't really doing digital, especially not for indie movies.
Sure.
Like not like
Couldn't
that.
afford it.
Yeah.
Wasn't cheap yet.
Yeah. So I figured that, but I was like trying to figure out. I'll have to Google this and figure it out. I'm like, how did they edit it like this in like. Because digital, obviously, you just take the clip and you oversaturate it or whatever. You
It's in the film, in the processing of the film.
Okay, cool. But like, right? But I'm like, which part of the process? And like, how do you make it all match? And like, how do you? I'm like, so because I don't know. I mean, I'm a photographer, but I've never worked with like actual like film.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I don't know but like, and I've never worked with like film in that way. I've obviously worked with film, but never worked with film. I never created a film with film. But yeah, there's some gorgeous shots in here. This is like one of my favorite kinds of film.
Well,
there's so many just shots of like something
out
pretty.
He went to college for painting. He was a painter, so he is
sense.
very much about the images. And
Makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It makes a lot of sense.
I liked what he said too, and I was like, yes. When I heard he said, if it's not like, if it doesn't have like pretty images or like if it doesn't have pretty scenes to look at, it shouldn't be a film.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yes, that's exactly it. If
it could be a novel. It could be a radio play.
Yeah, he's like, whatever. It shouldn't be. And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah, he says for him, like that's why the plot is actually very simplistic.
100%.
Which he says. And that was an intentional. He was like, for me, it's just I want an excuse to shoot these images.
Yes.
And there are so many that you can tell are
purposefully done. Yeah.
Also, the house on fire at the end. That's actual fire. There's like no CG in this.
No. Yeah.
And everybody running around the fire.
Yeah.
Are actually running through flames and shit. And he's talking about, like, in the commentary, he's talking about, like, eventually they got sort of desensitized to it. And you can see, he's like, see Lauren Dean running up the stairs here, like nothing, running through flames. He was like, that's because we were all used to it by that point.
I liked how he said people were, like, pulling him out of the way because he was getting super close to, like, the flames.
To back into
he didn't
burning
even,
cabinet or something.
Also, something that I found was really interesting. Keep saying something that was really interesting though, but what I thought was really interesting about them. So
you think that's interesting?
Yeah, you think
Wait
that's
till you
really
hear
interesting.
This thing I'm gonna
this
say.
Is actually really interesting. Something that I think was I guess exciting to hear about because like I feel like nowadays this doesn't happen. This isn't something that's a fear. This isn't something that anybody really has to worry about. Any longer especially when making independent films.
Running out of actual film?
They were literally like they were like by the end of the film, like the last scenes that were shot, he literally said that he was like they were like literally like
picking
searching
shit up off the floor, going through old canisters.
Yes, and like finding like little scraps of film that didn't have anything on them to use to be able to film the end of the fucking movie. I'm like, that's like some like hardcore shit right there. And that was like super impressive to me.
Yeah.
And honestly, he's barely in it. Quincy's a great fucking character.
Oh my God.
Quincy's such
so
a great
good.
character.
I'm going to put his whole fucking monologue in here because I love it so much.
It's Quincy, old man, are you listening to me?
Now, that's the second time you've called me old, young lady. And I have you to know that you are as young as you feel. And I feel like a baby. Well, I'm a baby of death. Corpses keep me juvenile. Misery is money. And grief, well, that's a miracle. Well, how do you do, young sir? Jude told me he found a little lost thing on the brink of death. And I said the brink would never do. Couldn't you push him all the way?
Lee, this is Quincy. He's the undertaker.
The impresario of undertakers, my dear. I get the dead, and I scoop out their smelly bits. I stitch them up and package them in overcoats of wood made by the wonderful Clay here.
And Lee.
Well, of course. Now, I don't charge much. I make dying a luxury, if not a necessity. Well, it's the most economical thing you'll ever do.
Come on, let's get out of the heat.
Okay. What do you have in this house to drink? Or who do you have?
Good God.
But no, he only had the Steadicam for an afternoon.
Oh my God.
And one of the ones they shot was Quincy's scene.
Yeah.
You could, and you know that's why it pans around. It's one shot.
Oh, and that must be why that might be why it looks a little bit different.
Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah.
And
you said she looked like one of those like
blow molds.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what they're called, but those plastic anyway, because the color's so blown out. Yeah, and apparently Quincy is just amazing. That guy, Lou
absolutely.
Myers, is the guy who played him. Showed up, delivered that.
So good.
I love that they gave him the space to do that.
Oh my God, yeah. He was the whole fucking he had the most he was the most fleshed out character out of everyone.
Pretty much, yeah.
Which is impressive because he's like the singular person of color in the entire fucking movie.
True. And he does a great job representing.
Yeah.
I picked up on this. Like, I didn't read it. Philip Ridley refers to it as like a sci-fi dystopia kind of thing. But there's all these references to, like,
yes.
So the coffins is one, and then Quincy shows up and he's talking about people are starving to death.
Yeah.
There's no work. So yeah,
right,
Ridley is talking about like,
in the beginning, Callie, he was like talking about Callie going to town, and she's like, "At least you have a job."
Oh yeah.
Which I'm like, oh, and I that really struck me because I was like,
yeah, I'm like, wait, is this set during the Depression or
right?
What's
Yeah,
the deal
yeah.
But the more I listen to the commentary and think about it, and you know, like the idea is that
I was wondering about that because there's so many references to like. He was like, people are dying, and everyone's like, nobody cares anymore, and like the world's like, and it both sounds like religious. This is what made it so interesting. It both sounds like religious zealotry.
Yeah.
As well as just describing like normal people functioning.
Is the rapture happening?
Right, as well as like an apocalyptic description. But what's interesting is that like
also King-esque in that regard.
What?
Stephen King.
Oh yeah, correct. I was like, I don't know that reference.
I have a dream.
Kafka-esque.
I don't know her.
So, but the way I feel like it's described kind of differently so the way Quincy describes it is that like people are suffering. Mm-hmm. Like people are starving, people are dying.
But it's also like grief is good business.
Well, yes, yeah. But no, what I'm saying is his description of the outside world.
Yeah.
He's like, people are dying, people are starving, like there's not enough for everyone, like, like we're in a really bad state. And also he describes their places like being very different from the rest of the world. Uh-huh. He's like, you have food, you have these things that no one else seems to have. But when Roxy's talking about it, she's like, I don't remember exactly what she says, but the way she describes it is like people don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Like there's no, and it's like her description of it is like, oh, everyone has lost their morality.
Yeah, right.
And Quincy's description of it is like people are suffering. So it was like a really interesting thing where like religious people will talk about it in the sense of like people are suffering because of their own moral failings. Mm-hmm. But so many people are suffering that it must be that no one cares anymore. It must be that, the devil's taking over because that's the only reason you would be suffering so bad. So it's all this, like, your fault that it's suffering. But, like, people who don't have that, like, religious indoctrination are like, wow, there's so much suffering in the world. People don't deserve to suffer this way. And there's no morality given to the suffering. Like, it's just, like, suffering is bad. And what I mean is, like, there's no morality given to, like, the people that are suffering. It's not like you must have done something to deserve the suffering. It's like suffering is what is bad, not the people suffering, And it's just, it was, like, a really interesting, again, I don't know how purposeful it was, but it felt like really, like, the way he describes it versus, the way he describes it is, like, is what struck out for me. The way she describes it is how Christians just talk about everything that's not Christian.
But it's also of interest, given all that it's he says, "My father was a preacher. He taught me how to preach."
Yeah.
You start slow and low, and then you get higher and more and louder, which is what the movie does also. That's
Right.
the arc of the...
But also, I like the way Ashley Judd responds to that, because she goes with him, like, as if she knows she's been told this by him before, which I was like, I liked it because it was like, it created this rapport with them.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was, I so much about this movie is like, just fucking watch it.
Yeah.
I think, I remember this. I've been wanting to say this since we watched it last night. I honestly think part of the way the movie is like confusing, or like may have been confusing, is the music. I think if it had more, I don't want to say, I think if it had better music, this movie would be a hit. This would be like, people would be like, oh my God. But there's a lot of like kind of, the music doesn't feel like it's one continuous thing. It changes, but it doesn't always feel like it matches what's going on, which I assume is what he wanted.
It doesn't follow a lot of the language you expect from a movie, right?
Correct.
Like,
and I feel like sometimes
you would expect a lot of strings, which there are
Yeah.
definitely some orchestral string moments that
Yeah.
happen. But then, like, Darkly's theme is kind of
all over the place.
synthesized.
Yeah.
To me, it sounds like I keep expecting like a dub techno thing to happen because it's like junkunka, junkunka. You know, like stereo,
There's
hard panned
Yeah.
chords that are repeating, and then like it's electronic.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly not.
And I mean, I'm just saying, like, I'm assuming this is from the way the director describes how he wanted this movie to be seen. Like, he doesn't want it to be real. He wants it to be surreal. He wants it to be completely confusing and not follow like a story. Right. So it makes sense that the music would do that.
Yes.
But for me, I was like, oh, if the music was different in this scene, this would be devastating. This would be absolutely devastating. This movie would be like, this would probably, I mean, I don't say this, I'm not trying to like shit on the movie at all. I think it was great. But I think if the music was better, this would probably be one of my favorite movies. Like, truly, like, now watching it, I'd be like, yes.
I know. Yeah. The language that popped into my head when we finished was like, this movie is almost genius.
Yeah, exactly.
And the things about it, like, I think that's one of the ambiguities or discomforts or about the film itself is like, you can't tell, like, you have Brendan Fraser, you have Ashley Judd, you have Viggo Mortensen.
Yeah.
Grace Zabriskie, all people we know and have seen in much more bigger, successful things, right? So to me, it's like unclear the competency of the filmmaker.
Yeah.
Like, it feels amateurish in a lot of ways.
Right.
And like, for me, I think you talk about the music, which is one element that doesn't feel like a polished.
Correct. Yes.
You know, like
it doesn't feel like a finished product.
Yeah, and to me, the editing sort of undermines a lot of it, which, again, it was clearly a choice. But, like, sometimes it really works, and sometimes it is almost comical, or like, is comical.
Like, the things that, like, the scene, so when Brendan Fraser is, like, when she, like, walks away from Brendan Fraser, and he's going away, and then suddenly it edits, and he's not there.
Yeah.
And then it shows him walking away. I think it would have been insanely more, like, jarring if it just cut and he was gone and you didn't see him again. I'd be like,
ooh.
But
it's
like
already pretty drunk. But to me, it's like, it's similar to the climax of Manhunter.
Yeah,
where,
for
like,
sure.
This was a choice.
Yep.
I don't know if it does what you wanted it to do. But
this was
committed.
a choice. You made a choice, and that choice has been made
so kudos
by you. Right. Yeah.
For taking some risks.
Yeah.
Yeah, watch it. Hit me up.
Watch it.
I'll burn you a copy if you want, because it's hard to come by. I got it on a Blu-ray. It's a screener, so don't tell the industry. Don't tell Arrow.
Yeah. I hope this I mean, I know that we're not like super popular, but I really hope this gets people to watch this movie.
Yeah, watch this movie.
This was like, I hope it gets.
I have so many notes from the commentary. Maybe bonus content.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can read it and then you can just trim it.
Let's do our sign off and then I'll do it.
Whoa. Let's
Good
do
enough.
our sign off. What?
Is that
that a dagger or a crucifix I see. You hold so tightly in your hand, and all the while the distance grows between you and me. I do not understand. In the blood of Eden lie the woman and the man. With the man and the woman.
Amy Larry.